Let's talk about Pastor Lucas Miles. Who is Lucas Miles? That is an excellent question. A lot of people don't know who he is. I didn't know who he was until maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I came across him online. I don't even remember how. Saw a social media post or something. Oh, it was probably an advertisement for one of his books. But I immediately started looking into it because he is kind of terrifying in a certain way. I'll get into that. But Lucas Miles is a pastor. He's a speaker. He's an author. He is a political pundit. Um, Whether he would admit to that or not, I'm not sure. But he's extremely political. I'm not going to poison the well. This is going to turn into a series. I'm going to talk a lot about Pastor Miles, and I'm going to try to avoid saying things out of anger because a lot of things that I've seen from Lucas Miles have made me really legitimately angry. So I'm just going to tell you about him, what he says, and we'll kind of go through it. And I'm not gonna use abusive language or anything like that. I'm going to be good. I'm going to be nice, but I want to get him out there, get his ideas out there because, like I said, I think he's flying under the radar a little bit. I don't know how big his church is, but he doesn't have very many followers on any of his social media accounts that I could find. Around 5,000 followers on Twitter. On Instagram, he has around 5,000 followers as well. I believe his church has more like 20,000 on Twitter. Um, so he's not out there with like a million followers. And it's possible that his shows, he has a few different podcasts and things like that. So it's possible that his shows have a lot of traction, and that's just not reflected in his personal following. I'm not sure. But today we're just going to I'm just going to give a broad overview of who this guy is, what he talks about, what he believes, some of the projects that he's involved in, some of the things he's created. And then a lot of these are going to become their own focused videos later on because there's a lot of these things. These things are all worth talking about in detail. So we're going to do just a little bit at a time. But today we're just going to go over broad strokes why I thought we need to talk about Pastor Miles and all the pies he's got his little fingers in. So um, one of the problems with doing this is Lucas Miles doesn't have a Wikipedia page. I've done just a little bit of cursory research. I have not been able to find bio on him that's complete, and he writes his own bios on his websites and things. So there's not a lot of real concrete information about him except kind of what he puts out there online. It's not like someone's written a biography on him. He's a young guy. I would guess he's in his mid 30s, something like that. At least he looks really young. It's kind of hard to know, but I think he's probably just a few years older than I am. I'll put some pictures somewhere. So this is from lucasmiles.org, which is his website. And this is his bio. This is kind of how he describes himself on his own website. Lucas Miles is a trusted voice in the American church who has consistently addressed some of the most challenging topics in theology, politics, and culture. He hosts Church and State with Lucas Miles, which was named the 2023 Program of the Year by the National Religious Broadcasters Organization. Lucas has been syndicated in articles across both political and religious news outlets such as Newsmax, The Blaze, Flashpoint, Fox News, The Washington Times, CBN, Christian Broadcasting Network, and The Christian Post. In addition to his newest book, Woke Jesus, The False Messiah Destroying Christianity, Lucas is the author of the best-selling book, The Christian Left, How Liberal Thought Has Hijacked the Church, as well as the critically acclaimed book, Good God, the one we want to believe in but are afraid to embrace. Lucas was also a contributor to the book Helping Millennials Thrive: Practical Wisdom for a Generation in Crisis, which features groundbreaking research from Dr. George Barna. Lucas has served as a faculty member of Summit Ministry since 2021, or an ordained minister since 2004. Miles is the lead pastor of Influence Church in Granger, Indiana, and the president of the Influence Network, Inc. So, that's kind of what he thinks, broad strokes, are the most important things about him, as one would write in a bio. Um, Nothing super crazy there. So his kind of his flagship product is this podcast, Church and State, or not a podcast. It's a I think it's an internet TV show. Church and State with Lucas Miles, and then he is also he writes a lot of articles and contributes to right-wing media organizations like Newsmax and The Blaze, the Washington Times, which is owned by a gentleman who runs the Moonies cult. I don't remember I'll put the actual title of that cult right here, and a link about that in the description, because I don't remember offhand. But the Washington Times, I'm not a big Washington Post fan, but the Washington Times is named that to kind of get you to think of the New York Post, or the New York Times and the Washington Post, which are somewhat, depending on your perspective, they are somewhat more reputable. But the Washington Times is just a right-wing garbage newspaper. It's a tabloid. It's like the Daily Mail. They just chose that name to try to make it sound legitimate. So let's talk a little bit about the Influence Network, which is kind of his baby, kind of a mothership for all of his other projects. There's no I, it's Influence. So if you're trying to find it and you're having trouble, it's because it's not spelled right. If you go to their website, influencenetwork.com, it kind of encompasses three main pillars, you could say. Influence Church, which is his actual church where he preaches. I think he's the lead pastor there. And they have a few campuses, and I think they do services online as well. Dug a little bit into their website. The American Pastor Project, which is basically, it's a pledge. It's like a patriot pledge that he wrote, that he tries to get other conservative pastors to sign off on, and that will be its own video, because there's a lot of stuff in there that's crazy. And then the real meat of this whole thing, I mean, there's a lot of things in here, but this is the one that really got my hackles up. The third pillar of the Influence Network is sexchangeregret.com, which is it's pretty self-explanatory what it is. It's about spreading misinformation about the rates of regret of gender confirmation, surgeries and therapies. It elevates the voice of specifically one detransitioner named Walt Heyer, who detransitioned in 1991 and is a pretty right-wing anti-trans activist. He has an interesting story. Media Matters for America has criticized Heyer as a source of extreme transphobic commentary. The website Think Progress criticized one of his books for overemphasizing detransition, and Heyer himself for, quote, creating a career for himself of advocating against transgender equality based on his ex-trans narrative. So I want to talk about Heyer. There's a lot here. He's written seven books, but he's not the focus of the video that we're doing today. Lucas Miles and Walt Heyer worked together on sexchangeregret.com, which is just chock full of articles, misleading articles and propaganda about how so many trans people regret transitioning and how it increases your likelihood of suicide by 1,000% or whatever. And we will get into all of that I'll do an entire video on sexchangeregret.com and Walt Heyer at some point, but we're going to move on from him for now because I want to get back to Lucas Miles and finish up this little intro, and we'll get into Walt another day. The American Pastor Project, we will touch on just briefly. Like I said, it's a statement that Lucas Miles has cooked up and is encouraging his fellow pastors to sign. And it's basically like, some of it's just basic Christian doctrine, the Trinity, the resurrection, saved by grace through faith, things that most Christian denominations hold as kind of the basis of their dogma, their doctrines. And then there's some pretty right-wing stuff in here as well. Let's see. So 2 of the lines in here: we recognize God's created order in making male and female, determined by divine imprint, genetically encoded at conception, and changeless. So the American Pastor Project explicitly rejects the existence of trans people. And then the next line: we affirm Christian marriage defined by one man and one woman, unified by God in holy matrimony. I think it should say defined as one man and one woman, because it says defined by one man and one woman, and that doesn't really make much sense. But so we rejected transgender people's existence. We reject the rest of the LGBTQ community, basically, in the next line. We believe righteous governments are ordained by God and exist to uphold lawfulness and to protect the people. As such, we reject corrupt and godless leaders who promote wickedness, impose unlawful mandates which ignore individual sovereignty, restrict the fellowship of the community of saints, and place unjust restrictions upon the freedom of the people. So that's obviously just COVID. He must have wrote this while he was ignoring lockdown recommendations, which were never mandates. Kind of the end of this statement: as pastors, we embrace our role to shepherd the people, and to the extent that we are able, to protect our nation from the deceptions of false teaching and anti-Christ agendas, including Marxism, socialism, critical race theory, universalism, critical queer theory, the slaughter of children both in and out of the womb. So at least he acknowledged that maybe we should start caring about children after they're born. That's nice. Climate alarmist theory, and globalism. As such, we hereby agree to not use our pulpits nor any extension of our ministries to promote these false doctrines, nor to give place to their advancement. So basically, the American Pastor Project is, we are conservative Christians. We're going to sign this pledge to only preach conservatism from the pulpit. It's pretty clear here what he's doing. I want to get into kind of what he actually thinks Marxism is, because it's pretty interesting, but it'll be later on. We're not going to get too deep into that today. What initially got me interested in looking into Pastor Miles and talking about his beliefs and his rhetoric and his influence is I got an advertisement on social media for this Woke Jesus, the False Messiah Destroying Christianity. So I left the church about, I guess, over 10 years ago. And a lot of that was due to the radical right-wing agenda that was rampant in the church and still is. And it's a heavily capitalistic, often racist, and extremely LGBTQ exclusionary view of the gospel. And this guy has the opposite view. He sees the church as way too progressive, and progressivism is just choking the life out of the American church. And so several of the books he's written have been kind of about that, but this one specifically is about how cultural Marxism is poisoning the Christian faith, and we have to turn back the clock and reclaim real, authentic conservative Christianity in this country. And it works hand in hand, with the American Pastor Project. Obviously, he rejects transgenderism, homosexuality in all forms, any kind of queer identity at all is antithetical to Christian values, and churches that accept queer people are heretical. He believes it's heresy to be accepting of queer people. I'll go through and find some stuff from social media that kind of gives insights into his day-to-day thoughts. I listened to several of his sermons. I was trying to find an audiobook of Woke Jesus online that I could listen to for free because I don't want to give this guy any money. And instead of being able to find that, I found a sermon series where he talked about his book and expanded on some of the ideas in it in a sermon series that, I don't know, it's maybe 6 parts. I've listened to the first 3 parts when he talks about reclaiming Christianity from the woke left and how cultural Marxism is poisoning everything, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. He seems genuine. And so I said earlier that I thought this guy was kind of scary, and here's why. Because usually when you have a hate preacher, or often, maybe not usually, but often when you have a hate preacher, they are screaming and spittle is flying out of their mouth, and they're, fire and brimstone. You're going to hell. Like, what is that guy's name? Kent Hovind's funny little friend, Matt Powell. People like Matt Powell who are just like, you're going to hell, screaming from the pulpit. And this guy doesn't do that. From what I've seen, at least, this guy doesn't fly off the handle. He is even-keeled. He's well-spoken. He's presentable. And he is quite intellectual. He says some crazy things and some very, demonstrably wrong things, to the point where when I'm listening to him, sometimes I have to just turn him off because I start screaming and he can't hear me. So I just have to turn him off for a minute and let my, blood come back down to a normal temperature. But he doesn't scream and yell and make a scene from what I've observed of him. But he's very eloquent. He's fairly well spoken. He's a good preacher. But his ideas are not less radical than those hate preachers. They are just more sanitized, and that's what makes him scary to me. Is when you see a hate preacher like a Fred Phelps type, it's easy to just say, well, that's a crazy man. And some people are going to listen to that, but he's not going to get as far as someone who can kind of hide that. A Fred Phelps type is pretty easy to spot. This guy could be any pastor in the country if you don't take the time to actually listen to his rhetoric. So I think he's got a lot of potential to do some real damage beyond what he's already done. So that's why I just want to make some videos, put some resources out there, because literally I don't see anybody talking about this guy. I'm in a few skeptic spaces online that debunks right-wingers and religious frauds. This guy's flying completely under the radar, as far as I can tell. If someone out there is already doing a great takedown of him, point me to him. I'd love to have some more resources. I think it's important to talk about this kind of guy. He wants to set the country, if not the world, back 200 years, and I can't fight him. So all I can do is try to be aware of what he's doing, what he's talking about, and inform you. So that's Lucas Miles. In the coming weeks, I'm going to do some more videos about him. Like I said, I want to say deep dive on several of these topics, but there's only so much information available about him. and about his ministries. So you can, at the very least, expect a video about the American Pastor Project. I'm going to dig into every clause of it. It's pretty short, but I want to dissect all of it in the language and everything. Try to find, there should be a list of who signed it so we can kind of get an idea. So we'll do at least a deep dive on the American Pastor Project. I want to talk about sexchangeregret.com and Walt Heyer. There's some really shady stuff in there, a lot of misinformation about queer people, specifically trans people. I am going to probably have to get a copy of Woke Jesus and read it. I'm hoping I don't have to buy it. Maybe I can get it from the library. I'm not sure. But that one will be a few weeks out because I'm going to have to read the whole thing and do a little bit of a dive on that. So probably at least 4 more videos on this guy, maybe 5. I really want to create some resources. If anyone goes searching for information about Lucas Miles, I want some information to come up that might not be from him, because it looks like pretty much everything is either created by Lucas Miles or glowing articles about him on right-wing publications. So we're just going to talk about him. I just want to get as much information on him as I can and give it to you guys so that if the name Lucas Miles comes up, you know who we're talking about. This has already gone kind of long, so I'm going to end it there. But keep an eye on this channel. Try to have another one of these other videos up next week for you guys. But as long as it takes to actually assemble the information and give you something that's worth watching. But that's all for today. Take it easy, but take care.